Perfect. Thank you, friend. I know we may have some stragglers coming here in a bit. Had some running around to do, but you guys have heard me talk about forgiveness once or twice, right? Yeah? Okay, cool. Who struggles with forgiveness sometimes? Is it more with forgiving other people, or like you're struggling to forgive yourself? Yeah.
I forgive people a lot. So
I struggle more with forgiving others.
Yeah.
I think I used to forgive way too easily.
Yeah.
It's flip flop.
Right. Yeah, it's a difficult balance to strike, but it's also a important balance to strike is forgiveness of ourselves and forgiveness of others. Um, who here has had a situation where they were suffering a lot because of what someone else did to them, or what you did to someone else, or what you did to yourself, and then you felt a big sense of freedom when you were able to offer forgiveness to the person? Samesies. Me too. Um, you guys got the disclaimer before, I'm no master of forgiveness. Um, Everybody has forgiveness written in their heart. They understand that it's a universal truth that the more you forgive, the less you suffer, and the more you forgive, the less other people suffer. So my goal is to just say a lot of things that you already know. I don't think that I'll say anything that you don't know already. The truth is written in our hearts, and when we access that truth, we are able to achieve higher states of mental and emotional freedom. So that's what this is all about, is placing more importance on forgiveness in our lives. And just as importantly, holding ourselves morally accountable for what we need to forgive. And to the extent that we're able, and to the extent that is within our rights to do, hold other people morally accountable for their behaviors. Um, getting pissed off and angry about things that truly don't matter, or aren't, or things that are not a true violation of consent or a true transgression, just squanders our sacred gift of anger, and lets us not use anger for what it's truly for, which is taking right action and compelling us to carry out moral actions in our life. So just as important as being forgiving on ourselves and others, we must hold ourselves morally accountable for the transgressions we make. And really, really, what is within our rights as far as holding other people morally accountable is speaking, is saying what's true. If somebody else makes a transgression against us, and it's something that it's happened in the past, there's nothing that we can do to undo that. But what we can do is tell someone, hey, I offer you forgiveness because I recognize the imperfect human being that you are, and I'm an imperfect human being too. However, what you did was objectively immoral, and it was wrong, and I will never condone that behavior, but I do forgive you, and I offer you that love. And that will break some serious chains that we place on ourselves when we can't forgive or won't forgive. Um, who has an ego? Yeah, me too. So repeat after me if you want to. I forgive myself for being human. I forgive myself for having an ego. Having an ego is not the problem. When the ego has us, the problem arises. And that's it. We've fucked up a million times, and we're gonna fuck up more times. And coming to understand that the times that we've done something or said something, whether it was to ourselves with negative self-talk or destructive behaviors, or it was said something to somebody else that we didn't mean, it was our ego talking. That was when the ego had us. If you ever look back on a situation and say, that wasn't the real me, that wasn't, that didn't come from my heart, that came from my ego, or I regret saying that. It wasn't the true you. It wasn't the real. It wasn't the statue inside the stone. It was the excess stone or the ego that made that remark and did that harmful thing, or said that, did that destructive action, or said that harmful thing to someone else. So forgive yourself for having an ego. We're all human beings, and you have an ego now, and you'll die with an ego. But the goal with forgiveness and moral accountability is placing our ego in the passenger seat and keeping it there, using our ego as a tool to engage with the world around us and to maintain survival, but to keep it in the passenger seat as a navigational tool, and not actually have it take the wheel. Hey friends, how you doing? Do you all have egos? Me too. We all do. We talked about it. We all totally have egos. No one that's ever walked the face of the earth, the greatest master, or the greatest teacher or spiritual adept, has ever been without an ego. When you are in a human body, you have a human mind. That is not all that your mind is, but it is a piece of who you are. It's a piece of you as a human being in your human experience. So having an ego is not the problem. It's when the ego has you that is the problem. Forgiving ourselves is the most potent and purified form of love, balanced masculine and feminine love that we can offer ourselves, or that we can offer others. It is true unconditional love when it's done correctly and when it's balanced with moral accountability. So I usually have a template for when I do these workshops, but I've had a whole lot of really inspirational things happen in the past few weeks of my life, and I just kind of wanted to go off the cuff. But I do want to talk about what forgiveness is not, and that is so important. Has anyone ever heard the word apophysis before, or the apophysio approach to knowledge or to truth? The method of using apophysis just means coming to an accurate understanding of what something is by elimination of what it is not. So speaking about what forgiveness is not is a very potent tool for understanding what forgiveness is. And when I talk about what forgiveness is not, I'm talking about what our ego wants to tell us about forgiveness, what our ego wants to say forgiveness is. And forgiveness is not apathy. It is not the lack of caring. Forgiveness is not remaining in a toxic situation or a harmful situation for yourself. Forgiveness does not require the offending party to be sorry or to even recognize they did something wrong. When we could spend the rest of our lives waiting and holding on to the poison of hatred and resentment and anger, waiting for someone to admit they did something wrong, when really we have zero control over what they do and what they perceive. We can say what is true, and we can point out immoral actions that were taken against us, or even immoral actions that we've done ourselves. But if we wait for someone else to, what if somebody harms you and then the next day they die, and you never get to find out if they were sorry or they express remorse? So waiting for someone else to be sorry or express remorse robs us of the freedom we can achieve through forgiveness. So if you really want to step into your own power, forgive someone who's not sorry. Forgive someone who doesn't even perceive they've done anything wrong. And that is a very potent tool for freedom, mental and emotional freedom. Uh, what else is forgiveness not? Christine, you got anything?
My ego sometimes tells me that, I know it's not true, but my ego sometimes tells me that forgiveness is weakness. Like I'm showing people the door is open, they can hurt me again because I'll just forgive them.
Right, right. Absolutely right. Your ego does want you to believe that, and that's why moral accountability is so important. If somebody, you know, if I'm with a partner, let's say, and they punch me in the face every day when I get home, well, I can forgive that imperfect person and the illness that causes them to aggress upon me. I can forgive that imperfect person, but I won't endorse the immoral behavior, and I will invoke the sacred masculine principle of self-defense and say this is not going to happen anymore. I'll remove myself from this situation. So, another important thing that forgiveness is not is endorsing immoral behaviors and not allowing someone to continue to transgress or violate you. So that's why properly applied and holding yourself and others morally accountable to the extent that's within your rights is so very important. Knowing what truly constitutes a transgression. What are your rights and what is a wrongdoing? Truly understanding and knowing what a transgression is or what a wrongdoing is allows you a clearer view of what you need to be pissed about, what you need to take action to stop or mitigate, and how to do that. So that's where holding yourself and others morally accountable comes with understanding moral principles. And when it comes to that, we can really look at 7 true deadly sins, or 7 true natural law transgressions, or moral transgressions, which are theft, assault, rape, murder, trespass, coercion, or willful deception. And that includes psychological assault, emotional assault, someone verbally berating you, constantly, things like that. Um, Understanding how to forgive, because a mind that is whole and free of illness, doesn't commit those transgressions against other people. So knowing what those transgressions are and knowing how to, within your rights, hold someone else morally accountable and separate yourself from the situation is of the utmost importance. Um, excuse me. Hey, everybody. Uh, we're talking about balancing forgiveness and moral accountability. The more we forgive, the less we suffer, and the more we forgive, the less other people suffer. And forgiveness is a great demonstration of both masculine and feminine love. It's a very purified, potent form of healing. When you're truly offering the energy of forgiveness, it, it's it's it absolutely shatters chains that we place upon ourselves when we refuse to forgive. So, who here can give an example maybe of a time where they were holding on to anger or resentment towards themselves or towards others, and whether you held on to it for a day or months or years, when you were finally able to come to terms and offer forgiveness to yourself or that person, experienced a level of freedom that you hadn't previously known. Has anyone experienced that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think that we all know that. I'm not saying anything that you don't already know. This truth is written in our hearts, and it's only the deception that our ego believes that keeps us from accessing that truth and carrying this out in our daily lives. So that's why, really, these workshops are just to serve as a reminder to everybody that give more attention to forgiveness if you want to. You can choose not to, but it may be at your own peril, because you could be creating blockades and keeping yourself in suffering. Um, and we went through a few things about what forgiveness is not. And forgiveness is not condoning a wrong behavior. It's not endorsing, someone causing harm or aggressing upon another. Forgiveness is not remaining in a toxic situation, that's harmful to you. Forgiveness is not complacency. It's not, accepting it's not accepting the behavior. It's accepting that the human is not perfect, and you're forgiving the imperfect human for being a human being, and understanding that when we do things that aren't the real us, and we transgress upon other people, that is based in ego, and that's not based in who we truly are. And it's the same for when somebody else is an asshole to us. Being able to see through that ego and recognize the flawed, imperfect human helps us develop compassion for ourselves and others. And we also talked about how forgiveness does not require the offending party to be sorry or to even recognize they did something wrong. You still have the choice to offer that forgiveness. Anybody have an example of something like that they struggle forgiving themselves for, or struggle forgiving other people for? Do you want to share? Okay. Sure. Sure. I'm going to repeat it if that's okay, so that I'm recording. So she said she has trouble forgiving her mother, and how difficult her childhood was, and how their relationship is not great right now, and not as good as it could be, and not as good as she wants it to be. Um, yeah, that's tremendous. That's a tremendous thing. Part of our shadow work and part of us healing the masculine and the feminine within ourselves is forgiving our parents for not being perfect, and forgiving our parents for not having all the answers, and forgiving our parents for having their human ego believe things that were not true, and acting upon that and causing suffering. So healing our feminine requires at some point forgiving our mother for when she let her pain and her illness, because we all have some degree of imbalance within the mind and the heart, for letting her imbalance or illness or pain become your pain, and recognizing that her heart, we have to differentiate between heart-based actions and ego-based reactions. When the ego has got the wheel, then we create tremendous suffering for ourselves, and we usually push it onto others too, because of our self-loathing. So understanding that those things that were done or that weren't done, whether she wasn't here for this or here for that, forgiving her for being an imperfect human, whether it's slight imperfections that are subtle things that you don't that you don't pick up on till later in life looking back, or whether it's blatant, overt, you know the terrible things that were done or that were ignored or neglected. um, Offering forgiveness to that imperfect human does not mean condoning that action. It does not mean that you're saying that that was okay to do. It's just recognizing that the human's imperfect. I can stand in opposition always to these certain actions that cause harm, but I can forgive that imperfect human. I had a older kid in my neighborhood molest me when I was like 6 or 7 years old, and I have no idea if he knows what he did was wrong. I have no idea if he's sorry. I have no idea that he perceives there was anything wrong with what happened.
Hey, sorry to interrupt me too, man. I had two people molest me when I was younger. Had no clue, man. It was fucked up.
I love you, man. I love you. It happens way more than we want to admit. It happens a tremendous amount. I work with people one on one, and with doing spiritual counseling and doing mental and emotional freedom counseling and things. And I'm just blown away. And I also have a background in pediatrics, so I'm absolutely blown away at the number of people. I'm surprised when someone says with honesty that they haven't had some sort of sexual transgression carried out on them in their lifetime, and it's painful. But um, me forgiving him, because I have entirely, it just means that I see him. I love every being in the universe, right? We're all here together. Even the nastiest, most murderous or terrible human being, I love them and I'm on their side. I want what is causing them to carry that out, to do those bad things. I want them to heal from those and stop doing those things. Me hating them or carrying around the poison of resentment in my heart for them is not. It's going to hurt me, and it's never going to help them. So I forgive that young man, but I'll never condone child molestation, right? I'll never condone sexual assault. I will always stand in opposition to that. And if you want to see the psychopath come out, try to harm a child in front of me, you know. So just keeping this is the balance of moral accountability, understanding what true right and wrong are, and what constitutes a wrongdoing, allows us to forgive imperfect people, knowing that we all fuck up, we have fucked up a million times, and we're gonna fuck up a million more times. Forgiving the imperfect person, but using your voice, and if necessary, using force to intervene and prevent those things those things that need to be forgiven from happening again. So, you know, I do these workshops and I teach, and in my time in pediatrics, I do everything I can as far as education, and I do what is within my rights to prevent sexual assault and violation of consent from happening ever again. And me forgiving him pushed me to a whole nother level of freedom, and that's when it just forgiving him wasn't my epiphany about forgiveness. It was during a divorce and a custody battle with my ex-wife that really brought me the gnosis of forgiveness. But understanding that when I offer that forgiveness, my suffering tremendously decreases, and that you can hold on to something and the resentment and the anger for months or years. You can wait until you're on your deathbed, and then you'll realize, once you offer the forgiveness, you'll say, holy shit, it was a free will choice that I could have made at any time. I could have chosen to forgive years ago and saved myself years of suffering, self-inflicted suffering, and I should have done it a long time ago. And it will set you free. Mental and emotional freedom it's a simple equation: forgive more, suffer less. And again, when we understand that, forgiving is a good masculine feminine balance, but it carries a little bit more feminine, the feminine true care principle and the true compassionate love for another, but invoking the sacred masculine principle of self-defense, not necessarily physically, but if someone's berating you or treats you terribly, or you're in a toxic situation, you have to love just as much as you wouldn't do that to that person. You have to love yourself enough to remember the lost word. You've got to say no. I won't allow myself to be in that situation anymore. I'll remove myself. I can love you from a distance. I can just recognize the inherent love in my heart that I have for you, but I don't have to like you, and I don't have to continue to subject myself to the harm that comes from this. So, and no one has to take my word for it either. This is stuff that we all know. We've all had experiences with forgiveness that really helped us out. And if you just practice in your daily life, you owe it to yourself to give some thought to it, and go back to when you were a newborn, or a toddler, an infant. Go throughout your life and forgive things that happened. Forgive things that maybe you thought you forgave, but really you just looked away. You really just got over it without truly offering it forgiveness and saying, I forgive that person. The action was immoral, and my forgiveness could never change that, but I forgive the person for being human. And I'm talking about shackles breaking. And the more we do this, it creates a space for people to forgive themselves. Forgiveness is not for them, it's for you. But oftentimes, when you offer someone forgiveness, it will make them hate themselves less. It will help them to hate themselves less, forgive themselves, and begin their healing process, or assist in their healing process to stop doing what needed forgiven. Does that make sense? Um, so we've talked a lot about what forgiveness is not, and let's talk about, describe a few things that forgiveness is. It is true transformational, transmutational alchemy. It is turning trauma into treasure. It is turning monsters in the form of your shadows and your darkness into teachers. It's removing the fear and the fear that's revolved around your wounds and your traumas. It's making them less fearful. It's making you less afraid of those things, so that you can look objectively at what happened and take the lessons from it. It's not a process that ends. Some things you may spend the rest of your life revisiting and uncovering deeper layers, and offering more forgiveness too. But it is alchemy. It is turning our base shitty experiences and consciousness into higher understanding and lessons that are going to help us evolve and grow. It's shadow work. Like I said, it's making friends with your shadow, and not, it is saying, no, I'm not going to run from these things that hurt me anymore. I'm not going to, run off and drink a bunch as soon as this thought of a painful experience comes out. I'm going to turn and hug my darkness and hug my shadow and find out what it's about and ask it to teach me. Removing the fear and breaking the cycle of self-hatred and self-loathing and fear from our traumas allows us to zoom out and say, what were the lessons, and how do I prevent those negative experiences from happening again? Forgiveness is true self-respect. I like to define words. I like to talk about the etymology of words, because when we truly understand what words mean, we have a higher understanding of why they're beneficial to us. The word respect comes from the Latin prefix re, which means again, and spectare, which means to look. So forgiveness for ourselves and for others is to offer true respect, to look again, and to maybe come to a higher understanding of that behavior in ourselves and what drove that behavior, or that behavior in others and what drove that behavior. Forgiveness is true self-love. Forgiveness is inner child work. Like I said, we can go back and, even like I just had a son, my firstborn son, 5 days ago, and we talked about, thank you. We, the circumcision came up, and part of inner child work for even, for circumcised males, and myself included, is to go back and it's genital mutilation. And I had to go back and, my background in pediatrics is I'm a pediatrician. I'm a medical doctor, and I did my residency in pediatrics. I've performed circumcisions. I've had to forgive myself for that. I've had to go back and forgive my parents for not truly seeing it for what it is, and seeing it as a religious ritual that somehow made it into our, modern healthcare system. And forgive the people involved for that. And this is just one example I'm using, but for forgiveness being inner child work, going and forgiving those aspects of ourselves and our lives that we don't know how they contribute to our behaviors today, but what happens during our formative years, it does affect what we do today, and it affects the lies that we believe and the suffering that we inflict upon ourselves. So forgiveness is inner child work as well. The very most importantly, and the ego does not want you to believe the next thing I'm about to say, but you already know it, and we've already touched on it today. Forgiveness is a free will choice. It has always been a choice, and it will forever be a choice that you can make, and only you can make. Placing forgiveness of yourself in somebody else's hands will only perpetuate your suffering. By virtue of your existence and being an imperfect human, you are forgiven by any force greater than yourself or outside of yourself. So the only person you're waiting for is you, to truly offer yourself forgiveness and love yourself completely. And even the times we fuck up and make immoral decisions, or we say something or do something we don't really mean, forgive yourself for that, and also hold yourself morally accountable. What am I going to do now to make sure I don't do that again? How am I going to work on that? Zoom out and take a look. Look again. Give yourself the respect of working on the problem and creating solutions. When we forgive, we stop voluntarily giving our creative power away to the fear and to the trauma, and we can take a more objective look and create positive solutions. Does anybody have any insight or like input, disagreements, agreements, feelings, thoughts? What's that? Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Is the emotion that I embody in childhood.
Sure.
And coming to that realization, it brings up so much resentment. And I think just channeling that into forgiveness changes the healing process of it. And gives an answer on how to heal. So this just really resonates.
I'm so glad. Sure. And you are working on it just by being here and by sharing and by confronting it and not and saying it out loud and saying it in the open, not running from it, not hiding from it. You're not just a human being, but you're a human, right? Forgive yourself for being human. Anxiety, the traumas that we endure that contribute to our anxiety are all part of our human experience. And you are forgiven for being human. I've got anxiety. It gets me, makes me paralyzed sometimes. You know, the first thing I do when I feel that way is say, I forgive myself for being human. I close my eyes. I forgive myself for being a human being. I'll never be perfect. I'll never master really any aspect of life or my own mind or my own heart. But I will gain higher levels of mastery if I start from a foundation of forgiveness. If I make forgiveness my state of being, my state of heart, and my state of mind, and go into situations forgiving myself, already having forgiven. You know, if there's harm being done, I'll intervene and stop the harm. But the imperfect human is forgiven. I'm not giving away my power. I'm not going to unload more resentment and hatred in my heart. My anger will be used only for things that matter and how to stop immoral things and combat, transgressions in the world. So forgive yourself for being human, and know that anxiety will flare up again. It's not over, but that's okay too. You will survive. You will push through. You've gotten through it all this many times. And I promise you, the more you can offer yourself that true energy of forgiveness and all the people, all the imperfect humans that you've experienced in your life, the anxiety will lessen and you will gain mastery over it, and you will be able to sit back and breathe and close your eyes and forgive and focus on what you can do. We can't undo the past, and we can only operate in the present, and we can't change anything in the future. We can only adjust and operate in ways to mitigate, to align with what is moral and what is right in this very moment. So Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, what's up?
Do you have any recommendations on how to communicate forgiveness with the other person you're trying to forgive?
So to communicate forgiveness, so how do you approach them and tell them? So there's a few ways to think about it. You don't ever have to tell them, but we want what's best for them, right? We want them to, you know, our ego at times may not want what's best for the other person, but if we stop and think about it truly, our heart does. Our heart doesn't want them harmed or them to suffer any more than they have to. You have to stand on the foundation of truth and speak what is true without fear and without expectation of how they're going to respond. Don't expect bad, good, or neutral how they're going to react. You're offering forgiveness for you with no attachment or expectation or need for them to respond any certain way. You know? I always start with telling people, I love you. And you don't have to use that word if you're not comfortable, but I love every human being that there ever was and ever will be. So I can tell them with honesty and truth that I love them. If they committed a serious transgression against me, harmed me in some way seriously, I can say, this action is wrong. Whether you did it to me, I did it to you, she did it to him, he did it to her, doesn't matter. The person, the action is wrong. It's objectively immoral. And if we talk about those moral principles, we'll touch back on that in a second. We can keep in mind, we can say this action is wrong, but I want you to know that I love you and I forgive you. And you can take that however you want, but I'm offering it to you, and they can't give it back. So if you're not attached to the need for them to respond a certain way to your forgiveness, they can't give that forgiveness back to you because you've given it. You've offered that energy, and you've broken your chains. So no matter what they do, you've offered the forgiveness. If the behavior doesn't change, or they continue to do something harmful to you, or the situation remains toxic, you've offered forgiveness. You'll continue to offer forgiveness for the imperfect human, but you won't subject yourself to harmful behaviors. Does that help or make sense? Those moral transgressions, those natural law transgressions, are the true 7 deadly sins. And natural law is just one of a million different words and phrases used to describe objectively immoral principles that are not subject to the whims of mankind, but they are written into the fabric of creation and written into our heart. And really, they can all be boiled down to a form of theft. Our one goal in this life is to learn one thing: don't steal. And then on top of that, don't let anyone steal from you. So rape, assault, theft, trespass, coercion, and willful deception are the 7 deadly sins. Did I do 6?
I didn't know.
That was 6? Rape, assault, theft, trespass, coercion, and willful deception. I think that's 7. Anyway, so obviously rape is the unjust taking of someone else's free will consent to sexual relations, right? Assault is the unjust taking or theft of someone's right to remain physically well or intact. Whether that's psychological assault, that's a violation too. If you're taking away their right to be psychologically well or emotionally well, however the assault comes, whether it's physical, psychological, emotional. Murder is the theft of someone's life. Theft, property theft is the unjust taking or the theft of something that is not your property. You didn't rightfully acquire it. Coercion is the theft of someone's ability to make a free will decision because they are doing it in a state of duress and under threat of violence or harm. And a willful deception, willfully deceiving someone and willfully lying, is the theft of someone's ability to make a free will informed choice, a free will informed consensual choice. So, willfully lying to someone and giving them wrong information and deceptive information is the theft of their ability to make an informed decision. So all forms of theft. And like, these are probably words that many of you haven't heard it described in before, used to describe it, or I use different vocabulary for some of these things. But am I saying anything that you really don't already know? And that for the most part, except when we falter sometimes, we really don't already operate within these boundaries? It's because it's natural law. It is the true moral principles that we operate on. And the two simplest and most important ones to think about, we've all heard about sacred masculine, sacred feminine, and we all have feminine and masculine aspects to our mind and to our heart and to our entire being. Well, the principle and pillar of feminine force is non-aggression. The non-aggression principle is the feminine aspect of ourselves, where you don't wake up in the morning and go threaten your neighbor and take their money, do you? Okay, so we all pretty much abide by the non-aggression principle. And the masculine counterpart to that is the self-defense principle. You don't allow someone to come to your house and threaten you and take your money every day, right? And if you saw someone doing that to your neighbor or hurting a child or any sort of transgression, you would intervene and not accept that, right? So these moral principles we already know. It's just like, I don't know what it is about revisiting them and talking about them and just putting them in these terms that, at least for me, have given me such a firm foundation to operate on and overstand and use as a foundation to conduct myself as rightfully as I can in this world. And I haven't come close. I haven't mastered any of this shit I'm talking about, but I've rediscovered the truth written right in here. And all of us have discovered and rediscovered at different parts in our life. And hopefully this workshop here has served as a bit of a reminder to not let the poison ideologies of the world confuse us about what's right and wrong, and about what truly constitutes harm to another. And don't for a second let anyone tell you that mankind or politicians or different religions or different governments or whatever get to write down on paper and dictate what's right and wrong. You already know what's right and wrong. So acting within our rights to hold ourselves and others accountable to right and wrong is just as important as forgiveness. Striking that balance will give you higher and higher levels of freedom and sovereignty in the world. And I believe that collective freedom can only be had when we as individuals take this sacred task on ourselves and do the work, the mucky, grimy, nasty shadow work that so many people would rather die than do, and do it, and then help others do the same. Create that vibration and that space for others to engage these principles of truth within themselves. And that's the only way we can ever manifest true freedom in this world. If we say we want a more free society, there are requirements for it. And I believe that these are the requirements. Anyone else got anything?
I like how you touched on like all of the sins are just basically different iterations of that.
Yeah. It's important to distill it down to something that you won't forget it. Don't steal. Don't take anything that isn't yours, including life, consent, blah blah blah, all that. Don't take it, and and just as importantly, don't let anyone take yours, any of your well-being. Don't violate anyone's consent, and don't allow anyone to violate you or your neighbor's consent. And it is that simple. Despite what you'll see everywhere around you, everywhere you look in society and schools and all over the world, it is that simple. And it will always be that simple. That's immutable law.
How much do like this forgiveness and I guess the art of letting go kind of intertwine? Because letting go is like even work.
I think that letting go is important, but I believe that the true, written in every scripture and every spiritual teaching throughout the ages, from the occult to the exoteric to the esoteric, forgiveness is a cornerstone. So letting go can sometimes sometimes be a euphemism for just looking away from what hurt. And I say that letting go is important, but first, speak out loud. I forgive that imperfect human. The action may have been immoral. I'll never endorse an immoral action. I will never support or condone an aggression or an immoral action from someone else, but I do forgive that imperfect human. If you make sure that you offer that forgiveness, the true energy, because it's an energetic deed, it's an action, and it takes guts. It takes the feminine care and the nurturing and compassion to want to do it, and then it takes the masculine action to offer that forgiveness, give that energy, and it can never be given back to you if you truly do it. Once you do that, then you can let go. But you'll find that even though forgiveness can be a process, you may come back to certain events and have to uncover more layers, that need to be forgiven. But once you truly give the energy of forgiveness, then you have let go in a sacred way, in the truly transformative and healing way. We just have to be careful that we don't let go in a way that is bypassing. Does that make sense? Yeah. We all know that there's no way out. The only way out is through. Right. Anyone else got anything? I'm sure I've run over my time. I don't have my phone with me. Yeah, we're good? Okay. Anyone else have anything they want to add or share or comment? I truly believe I didn't say anything up here that you don't already know. Though I may not be perfect at delivering the message, and I may use the wrong word sometimes. I think that the truth comes through really in the energy, and the words are just kind of like decoration. I think that this is all universal truth, that you didn't need me or this workshop to know, but it sure does help when we realize we're not alone, and like that we don't have to have the confusion about like, well, do I know this or not? So I hope that you all gain some value from this, and I love you so much. Can you repeat a couple things after me if you choose to? The more I forgive, the less I suffer. The more I forgive, the less others suffer. I am a human being. I am imperfect. I will never be perfect. And thanks be. Because if I wasn't perfect, there'd be no fun work to do. You wouldn't learn anything if you weren't perfect, or if you were perfect. So, accept yourselves, forgive yourselves completely, be here now, and unfold your creative power right now to work on the things we need to work on. And we can't go back and change the DVD once it's been printed and the movie's been printed, so we can't go back in the past and change what's happened. Could never possibly be done. So forgive, don't forget. Thanks so much for coming, fam. I guess that'll do it.